2026 has this potential to be a really big year for Warhammer 40k. We've got a bunch of stuff going to come out for the tabletop and also the video games. And the reason that matters a lot for Warhammer 40k lore is because Games Workshop love their money. And given that they love money so much, they will often bring out lore developments alongside their releases because they want to make sure that existing fans are also interested to get into new things. So for example, when 11th edition comes this year, which it likely will do, that means we're going to get kind of a new lore development for the Imperium of Man. A bunch of things will move forward, a bunch of Imperial factions will get a new focus, and a new kind of, well, not a new enemy, but an existing enemy within the setting. In this case, it's most likely orcs, will get a bunch of attention within Warhammer 40k. And this allows us to make some pretty interesting predictions. So according to the powers that be, by which of course I mean Valrak, I believe the theory is that orcs are going to be the bad guys in 11th edition, as in they'll be the other faction opposite the Imperial force, most likely Ultramarines, in the box that comes out alongside 11th edition. And the reason that's cool is because we've had some pretty interesting orc lore this last year, and that could likely be setting up what the new plot line is going to be in 2026. So we've had a few orc plot lines in recent years, but in 2026 we had the Grotsnik book, and the Grotsnik book is setting up this idea that Grotsnik is going to try and create basically like a new Ghazghkull. He wants to create a new big powerful orc that is either going to be a great big challenge for Ghazghkull to make Ghazghkull even stronger than before, or could replace Ghazghkull in something that Grotsnik might be able to control more directly in the future. So it's a pretty exciting time. And if Games Workshop want to kind of move the orc line forward, storyline forward, but they don't want to make it such that the lore is bogged down in just Ghazghkull kind of fighting Yarrick over and over again, or whatever it's going to be, they can introduce a new potential rival to Ghazghkull. So we've already got like this kind of lore the Games Workshop is kind of playing around, setting up with in the background that might be a direct play-in to what's going to happen this year in 11th edition. Then, in addition to that, we've got like the Ultramarines are going to get a bunch of new focus, of course, and this is a massive deal for us right now, because in the current Warhammer 40k timeline, we're all familiar that the Lion's back, etc. But Guilliman is also going back to Pariah Nexus. So last year we read about Guilliman's kind of first interaction with the Silent King in the book. The Silent King. It was well named. And in that story, Guilliman kind of meets the Silent King for the first time. He comes to understand the full extent of the Necron threat to the Imperium of Man, how the Imperium of Man is largely just kind of outgunned and just, the technology is so far beyond what humanity has. But now he's going back. So he after that book, he leaves the Pariah Nexus, is kind of being left alone, but Guilliman is now going back to Pariah Nexus. Belisarius Cawl has been waging war against the Silent King. Imhotep the Stormlord has turned up. Vashtor the Archifane turns up as well. And now Guilliman is about to go back. So if we're going to jump back into the current Rebute Guilliman plotline, Ultramarines plotline, which we almost certainly will do, it tells us that Guilliman is probably going to face the Silent King again, and he's going to come face to face, hopefully, with Vashtor the Archifane. We know that Vashtor is especially obsessed with Belisarius Cawl, so there's a direct tie-in here to what we saw in the Archmagos novel, but it seems quite likely to me that Rebute Guilliman might run into Vashtor, and Vashtor, as we all well know, has already discovered that Lionel Johnson is back, and Rebute Guilliman doesn't know this. So I think that that's a pretty cool way for Games Workshop to inform Guilliman about his brother's return, and thereby set up the inevitable reunion between the two brothers. So it's a pretty exciting time. As for Vashtor more widely, we talked about this the other day, where in the video I did where I talked about Archmagos, we kind of get this discovery that Vashtor the Archifane has been planning a lot around Belisarius Cawl. Belisarius Cawl is quite important to the Archifane's plans. We don't know exactly why, but Cawl has been, he's been crushing it. He's just been nailing it lately. Everything he wants to accomplish, he basically accomplishes. All the technology he wants to create, he basically creates without issue. And Vashtor the Archifane has revealed that the reason things have been going so well for Belisarius Cawl, or one of the reasons, is because he's allowed it. He's allowed Belisarius Cawl to go ahead and create these kind of new Blackstone pylon networks to close warp rifts for a reason, and we're going to find out what that reason is, hopefully in the near future. One of the really great things about modern Warhammer 40k lore is that we don't really have to wait very long between books anymore to find out like plot development. So in addition to that, like if we talk about, for example, the dying of the emperor on the golden throne, last year they introduced the Silent King, where we find out that there's a new fabricated general of Mars, and she is planning to basically kill the emperor and then usurp Rabute Gilliman and carve out as much of the Imperium as she wants for herself. And then they follow that storyline up directly in Archmagos, where we've got servants of hers trying to recruit Belisarius Cawl and others to her cause. So this is a plotline Games Workshop are pushing full steam ahead with. So it seems that's another big plotline that hopefully we can get this year. That you know, if the Mechanicus wants to make their play for the Imperium of Man, or at the very least, should Rabute Gilliman find out that the Mechanicus is basically just sabotaging the Imperium at this point, basically working against the Emperor, that would be a great way to bring in the Lion, because the Lion and the Dark Angels have got a long history of bringing the Mechanicus to heel, and there's so much we could just do with that storyline. So that for me is like one of the storylines I'm most excited for personally, and I think we've got so many stories. And if you've played Space Marine 2, if you've read any 40k novel, the Mechanicus are so often just kind of like such bastards. They're always the bad guys, but having it be the case that they're going to make a proper play for like a civil war. If Gilliman finds out that the Emperor is dying, he will have to intervene, and the Adeptus Custodes should know the situation. So the custodians who worked with the Inquisitor Erasmus Crowell to uncover the fact that the Emperor is dying, they, as far as we know, died in the webway. Maybe some of them survived, and we'll find out. As far as we know, they died. But it is clear that the custodians are now aware that the Golden Throne is failing, and they themselves are going to work to try and fix the Golden Throne. So you've got the Adeptus Custodians who are going to discover that the Golden Throne is failing. They're going to try and fix it. That's going to take them into, of course, contact with the Adeptus Mechanicus and the new Fabricator General, and therefore they will likely discover that the Mechanicus are basically just killing the Emperor, and once he's died, they are going to take as much of the galaxy for themselves, and at that point, you've got a fucking massive civil war on our hands, because you're going to have to bring Mars to heel. We've like the most amazing thing about this storyline, and I really want to do a whole stream on this one day, like in terms of 40k being completely mad and bonkers, it's really important to drive home that there was an entire civil war on Mars the Games Workshop just put in the background, where they just never explained it. So after the last Fabricator General died, a succession crisis unfolded, because he'd been the Fabricator General for centuries. He then dies, and Mars breaks up into civil war, factions, you know, lots of people die. We don't know the exact death tolls, etc., etc. But then a new Fabricator General is found, and she is now planning to do a lot of very, very bad things. So it's a pretty crazy time, and yeah, I mean, already, if a new Ultramarines focus, a new Orc focus gives us so many plotlines that we can see in the near future, and things that I think we're likely to see in this year. I do think we're going to see a continuation of the Prior Nexus, and I do think we're going to see a kind of a finishing up of the Fourth Tyrannic War. If you haven't read it, there was a book that accompanied 10th edition called Leviathan. Each edition gets like a book that focuses on the edition, and the 10th edition book is called Leviathan, and it's about the Ultramarines and their plan to basically kind of blunt the Ultramarines, the Tyranids' advance as much as possible, because the Tyranids are making a beeline for Terra. And in addition to that, we find out that the Tyranids are particularly concerned with Gilliman, and they want to take Gilliman out because, of course, he's a linchpin to the Imperial defense. And at the end of that book, the Ultramarines basically lose, but they do get to work, or at least an apothecary biologist gets to work on a biological weapon that allegedly is going to be able to at least destroy those two splinter fleets. At least those two splinter fleets could be destroyed. So it looks like if Games Workshop want to kind of give the Fourth Tyrannic War a satisfying ending, pretty cool way to do that. Have the Tyranids assault a planet, have the Ultramarines deploy their weapon. The Ultramarines are really the best Tyranid killers that we have right now, and then they use this biological weapon, wipe out a massive number of the Tyranids, just as the Tau had previously, and that would therefore kind of bring the Fourth Tyrannic War to an end. It doesn't remove High Fleet Leviathan from the game or anything like that, because they'll have lots of splinter fleets. They're all off doing random stuff, but I think it gives us kind of like a cool narrative conclusion to Space Marine 2, to the Leviathan book, to 10th edition, and I think that will probably come this year. And then I do think we're going to see Gilliman go to the Prior Nexus, because at some point, someone has to tell Gilliman that the Lion's around, and it's I mean, Vashtor's as good a person as anybody to make it exciting, right? But yes, hello. Hey chat, how's it going? My best guess is at least one novel where at least two Primarchs interact with each other. Gilliman, the Lion, Fulgrim, Magnus, Angron. Mortarion is probably still in Time Out. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so Mortarion being Time Out is a thing that happens at the end of the Dark Imperium series. It's quite funny. I did a short about this where it actually talks at the end of the Dark Imperium series that because Mortarion, he beats Gilliman in the fight, as it were, but he does lose because Gilliman is then, of course, filled with the power of the Emperor, and Gilliman burns the Garden of Nurgle. Terrifying ideal, basically. Anyway, so when this happens, Nurgle's very unhappy with Mortarion, and I think he imprisons him in like an egg sack for centuries or something like that. And it said, and this is where like gods and mythology get really interesting in 40k, it said that Gilliman's wound to the Garden of Nurgle was so bad that Nurgle can't sleep properly anymore. And of course, you don't really imagine Chaos God sleeping, but that's the language they use in the book. So it's kind of funny. So Mortarion is in Time Out, but fortunately the warp is timeless, so they can bring Mortarion out anytime they want. But you do raise a really good point in terms of which Primarchs will fight, and that brings me on to Dawn of War 4, because as we've looked at before, the Lion is going to come in Dawn of War 4, and that is a big deal because it tells us that the Lion is going to need someone to fight against. And the trailer sort of hints that the Necrons have some sort of big bad that's going to come up. I think it's pretty likely that he'll fight against like a Hanshard or something like that. But the absence of chaos in the Dawn of War trailer is pretty telling, and I think is likely going to mean that, as with most 40k video games, there's going to be a surprise chaos incursion. And the question therefore comes, who will the Lion fight? Because Mortarion he's in a timeout, but also he fought against Gilliman in Plague Wars. Then we have Angron, and the Lion's already fought Angron once before, of course, in the Arcs of Omen campaign. He might have fought him multiple times since, who knows. Then we have Fulgrim. Fulgrim is back. Fulgrim's a pretty good choice because he's like the new Demon Primarch kind of back in the setting, and he just got his novel last year. And then you have Magnus the Red, who again is a really great choice. Of course, Gilliman has fought against Magnus the Red when he returned, and the Space Wolves also fought against Magnus the Red. So I think Fulgrim Magnus are definitely more likely, but given the presence of the Thousand Suns in Space Marine 2, my gut says it's going to be the Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children coming in Dawn of War 4. That's my guess. And I think that would be pretty cool because both Fulgrim and the Lion are Blade Masters. So that's going to be pretty interesting. And of those 4 Demon Primarchs, none of them have a particularly kind of close connection with the Lion. Of course, all the Primarchs interact at one point or another, like not necessarily in the books, but in the background. But yeah, none of them are particularly kind of anti the Lion or opposite the Lion. And I think Fulgrim being a Blades Master and the Lion being a Blades Master at least makes that pretty cool. So we'll see. And given that the Lion's kind of plot line is based around the idea of him being this incredibly arrogant and kind of over-the-top character in the Heresy, and in 40k he's kind of put all that beside him, and now he's a much more humble character, I think that having him placed opposite Fulgrim, who of course has very much not made that transition and done the opposite and is just as arrogant as ever, I think it makes that a pretty cool showdown. I'd love to see that. Yes, a lot of you guessed that I was just talking to myself for a few minutes. Yeah, that totally happened. The problem I have, right, okay, is that OBS, which is the software I use to stream, they changed, at least on my half, they changed how I start the stream, where I used to click, so I used to select the stream, I used to click start streaming, I used to click go live. And for some reason, sometimes when I click start streaming, it puts me live. And now sometimes I still have to click go live. And so half of the time I have started the stream early because I didn't know I've gone on too early. And the other half of the time I click start stream believing I'm gone live, and then I realized I haven't. So there we go. Will we get Pandemonium 2026? I'd love to say yes, but I doubt it. So Pandemonium is the third book of the Beckwin series, and is probably going to be the book that does more to shake up 40k than any other book ever has done, outside of maybe the return of Gilliman and Gathering Storm, if you call that. But at the same time, Dan Abnett is aware of this, Games Workshop is aware of this, and I found this Facebook post which I shared with you guys where Dan Abnett has said he's basically finished it, but Games Workshop are waiting for the right time to release it. And given the impact it might have on the setting, and given that Games Workshop are preparing to do all of their Amazon TV show stuff and Dawn of War and Total War stuff, bringing a lot of new people in, they probably don't want to bring in anything too groundbreaking for the setting in the immediate future. So I suspect there's going to be a little bit of a delay, but I would love to be wrong about that. And we will see. It's entirely possible that they could release Pandemonium, and whilst Pandemonium will come with all of these incredible reveals, it could also be true to say that like it would all be in like the background, and like so if maybe for example, even if it was like the creation of the Star Child in 40k, if that happens in a a dimension outside of our reality, or happens on a quiet planet far away from the Imperial core, you could therefore just kind of like leave that lore where it is for a while, and Games Workshop could go back to it in the future when they want to. So it's not impossible, but given the inevitable impact that Valdor's kind of return will have on the setting, I doubt it, but I really love to be wrong about that one. Tom Ennis, thank you for joining the channel. Trevor, member of 23 months, thank you so much, everyone who supports the channel. Big Monkey King, one thing you're forgetting is that Perturabo is apparently working with Vashdor, meaning we could potentially see him back and deal some damage. That's cool. I mean, you're right. I mean, officially that is a thing. A lot of people have theorized for a long time about their relationship, and Games Workshop, it's an obvious thing that has to be addressed, because if anything, Vashdor was kind of creeping on Perturabo's lore a little bit. Perturabo's lore was heavily influenced around in terms of what he kind of like did for the Chaos Forces, and given that most of the Chaos Primarchs kind of did nothing for 10,000 years, or did very little of consequence, one thing Perturabo did do in the old lore was create the demon engines, and that was a source of conflict within the Chaos Forces. It was a source of new technology for them to use against the Imperium as well. And in modern 40k lore, they push quite a bit of the demon engine stuff more towards Vashdor's lore, and that kind of takes a little bit away from Perturabo. And so people theorize that are they the same character, are they a similar character, or is there some overlap here? And it looks like whilst they will share a lot of ideals, they're just distinct characters. And unfortunately, as much as people like to theorize it, I don't think you want to see Perturabo being a demon prince of Vashdor anytime soon. But they are friends, they have worked together, and they're cordial as far as we know. But in terms of seeing Perturabo in like Dawn of War to fight against the Lion, which would be a pretty good choice, because of course the Lion and Perturabo have a little bit of a relationship, given that the Lion made the mistake of handing the siege weapons to Perturabo before the traitor, the heresy, the full extent of the heresy was discovered. At the same time, I don't think they'd reveal a demon Primarch in Dawn of War. It's not impossible, it's just unprecedented. And yeah, so that's the thing. And we've just had Fulgrim. I feel like we will definitely get Demon Purty at some point, of course, but when that will come, I don't know. But again, something I would fucking love to be wrong about. If we see Demon Purty in Dawn of War 4, that would be quite something, and probably easier to sell, admittedly, for Games Workshop than an Emperor's Children range, because the Emperor's Children are less family friendly, shall we say, than the Iron Warriors, and that's saying something, to be fair. So there we go. Ghazghkull versus Angron, please. Ghazghkull versus Angron. I mean, it's got to come. I think that there's a good chance that comes this year, to be honest with you, because the fans want it. The fans want it so bad. It would be amazing, and we know the Orcs are going to get a big focus. We know Angron is just out there, just killing stuff and doing all kinds of incredible things. There are rumors out there about a Yarrick return someday, and so bringing Ghazghkull into conflict with Angron, because the reason that works especially well in the lore is that, again, in Ghazghkull's novel, in the Grotsnik novel, we do discover that Ghazghkull is pretty smart. Actually, he's genuinely quite smart, and he's smart enough to understand that he understands how orcs work and how orcs grow and become more powerful. And he actually understands that for him to challenge Ghazghkull, it's just nothing but net for him. It's just everything's going to get better, because if he challenges the big boss, then even if he loses to Angron, then then Ghazghkull will just become stronger and stronger as a response. The orcs will just go more and more in power, and ultimately, his respect for Yarrick is one of the reasons he released Yarrick, allowed Yarrick to live. And given that Angron defeated Yarrick according to the rumor mill, then if Ghazghkull at least believes it's Angron's fault, he would want to challenge Angron to make himself better and stronger. So I think that would be pretty exciting. And yeah, I mean, it would just be such an epic showdown. It's like something a big showdown like that, which has no Imperial character in, would just be amazing. I think the fans would go up nuts for it. Big ups for Ultramarines. They've been out of the spotlight for far too long. That's true. I mean, in the meantime, before we get to 11th edition, we have got the 500 Worlds campaign to come out, which they've just previewed today. So that will come out in 2 weeks. I would definitely be getting the lore for that. And I'll also be picking up the new Tau characters, I reckon. In fact, I can probably... can I... Yes. Okay, yes. Actually, the Tau characters out? Oh, the Tau characters are not out. I tell a lie. Okay, but yes. So in a couple of weeks, we have got the 500 Worlds campaign kind of dropping, and we've got this new book with, I think it's 80 pages of lore on the 500 Worlds and what Captain Titus is doing and what they're up against, and in particular his battle against this new Necron character, Necrosaur Amentar, and Amentar's plan to unite like all of the lost shards of the Nightbringer to bring back a proper Catan into Warhammer 40k, which would immediately become one of the most powerful beings in the setting. And so, I mean, that would be pretty crazy. Can you imagine if that happened? I don't think they'll necessarily get that far, but I certainly think there'll probably be some sort of lore around him making kind of like the biggest combined shard of the Nightbringer that we've ever seen, and Titus has to go up against it. And of course, with the Shia, as I believe Chapter Master Manius Calgar said, Titus is built different. So he's gonna win that one easily. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. And then yeah, we've got all of these. We very sadly no Chiron, but we have got Titus, Matarius, and Gadriel coming out as well, which is amazing. And I'm so sad they gave him the power sword and not the axe, though. The axe looked way cooler. But yes, they are coming next week as well. So if you are a Ultramarines fanboy, it's a good time. I think it was at least a couple of weeks since you got your last model release. So that's, yeah, top work, everybody. Well done. Nick, thank you so much. Would GW reverse Demon Primarchs into Grails? My God. So the Grails are a very mysterious part of Warhammer 40k. They're just described as like luminous warp entities. They're not necessarily bad or good. They seem to be aligned in most ways. And it's, yeah, they seem to be relatively independent creatures as far as we know. So in terms of reversing Demon Primarchs into Grails, I don't know exactly how that would manifest. But if you put it in chat, I'll be interested to hear what your theory is. But in terms of like Valdor attempting to do something like that, I doubt it. Where were we? One thing I don't understand is with the first Scouring book is there is no Primarch reaction to Sanguinius dying, not from Guilliman, the Lion, the Wolf, Vulcan, etc. Fair play. I mean, it's a fair comment. I think that you can put that down to there is already so much Chris Wright had to cover. We do know that Primarchs reacted strongly to Sanguinius' death. We do know that he was loved by all of them. Even in like the Lions novel, when he returned, he makes, I think, 2 references. 2 times he talks about Sanguinius dying and how that affected him, and how Sanguinius was his most beloved brother, etc. And of course, Guilliman has made it very clear to Dante just how important Sanguinius was to him. So we can be pretty confident that they were all a bit sad. I guess it's just there was a lot to cover in one book, and so they didn't have time for it. But yes, I get where you're coming from. I hope they do cover that in the near future. They really should do. And it's an interesting one because in a weird way it's sort of eclipsed by how at this point in time, at least from the old lore, the Primarchs do sort of react like the Emperor has died. I know he's not dead in like the traditional sense, and he's still, on the Golden Throne, but they sort of feel like he's dead because they feel like they're never going to see him again. So that's, yeah, they're sort of mourning their father as well, which I guess eclipses the death of Sanguinius, but the death of Sanguinius is definitely a big thing for But yes, I mean, the other thing is you make a good point in terms of we should talk about the next Scouring book, which will come out. I think people were hoping that that Carnage and Ending novel was going to be the next Scouring book. I don't believe it is it? I think they've now revealed it's going to be something in 40k. Maybe it's a... I think maybe it might even be an anthology. Carnage and Ending. Yes. Yeah, Carnage and Ending was the book that people discovered was on Amazon. Hang on. Yes. So yeah, this was the book. People were like, "Oh, is this book going to be the next kind of Scouring novel?" But actually, it just looks like it's going to be a anthology of various, I guess, Primaris Space Marine stories, or I don't actually know. Yeah, what would be an anthology of? Yeah, just various Primaris Space Marine stories, I guess. But still, better than nothing, I guess. I don't know if you guys buy these anthologies, but most of them are just sort of existing books that are put together. So it's unlikely there'll be any kind of new lore within that, right? But definitely we'll get another, maybe even 2 Scouring novels next year, if we go at the pace of the Horus Heresy. And if we get 2 novels, that will take us... that's a big deal. Of course, we've got so much to cover in the meantime. The Chaos Gods still have to be kind of, revived, as it were. They have to be kind of like brought back after their kind of defeat at the hands of the Emperor. And in addition to that, we have got so much lore to go over. The Lion has to go back to Caliban. Corvus Corax is off doing something which has to be discovered. Perturabo is going to try and ascend to demonhood. There's all these big plot lines that are yet to come up, and that's before, I don't think we'll get to the Iron Cage anytime in the near future, because I think that's probably like one of the biggest events in the Scouring. So I think we'll build up to that for a while, but it's all on the horizon. So fingers crossed. Happy New Year, everybody who said Happy New Year so much. Oh, you're all right. I just realized I didn't actually use the King and Yellow mention earlier, but there we go. Stay tuned. Will we get any Minotaur's lore? Minotaur's lore is unlike... Minotaurs have only really ever appeared in one novel, I'm afraid, and in that they are important in the novel, but they're not the central faction of the novel. It's in the Regent Shadow. So they are, of course, there, and they're doing their job of serving the High Lords, in particular serving kind of the old High Lords at that point in time. And so they're definitely a big deal, but they don't get like center stage in their own novels like the Carcharodons do. However, it is one of those things. It's very strange that, given if we look at those kind of factions from like the Imperial Armor Tones and like old Warhammer 40k factions, given the success of the Carcharodons, who now have like 4 novels, like that's pretty good. Those numbers must be impressive. It's always been bizarre that they don't get more Carcharodon novels. One of my predictions for this year is that we will get a novel on the Badab War, and I think that seems likely. So if you have if you take a look at the Badab War, most of the lore actually comes from, almost all of the lore comes from the Imperial Armor Tomes. And in the Imperial Armor Tomes, it's not a novelization. It's a very different type of writing, and it's very, very popular lore. But it's never actually been novelized. And Games Workshop in recent years have been taking old campaign books, which is what the Imperial Armor Tomes are, and novelizing the events that happen in them. And normally in the novels, they actually cover either the same events from like a different perspective, or they cover other things that happen in the campaigns that original book doesn't delve into. So for example, the Fall of Cadia novel covers the same event as the Fall of Cadia campaign book, but we get completely new characters, we get completely new perspectives, and we get kind of like new insights into kind of the big climactic events of the book. Likewise, the Siege of Rax was another one where, again, we visit some of the old characters from the campaign book, and we get kind of new perspectives on them. Some of them even have very different trajectories to what we knew about them previously. And I think that it seems pretty likely that when it comes to the Badab War, I think that giving us a novel on the Badab War would be very, very popular. It would do really well. Probably it might even be a straight in for like most popular novel of the year. And it's some of the most popular Warhammer 40k lore there is. So if I was to place a bet on like and again, I have no reason to think this, I don't get rumors or anything like that, but if I was to place a bet, I'd bet on the Badab War getting a novel this year. I think that will happen, but we'll see. I'd love to see the Eldar, Orcs, and Tau having a more substantial impact on the state of the Imperium rather than the Tyrannid Chaos focus. I mean, totally, brother. I think everybody does really agree with you there. Tau less so. I don't think Tau are going to have a massive impact on the wider galaxy, but certainly they've got lore to kind of like push them forward and make them more interesting. I think the Elemental Council doing so well. I think that did really numbers. It's Andy Newen, I want to say. Randy, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, I'm afraid, sorry. But yeah, that book did so well. It was really well written. I did a review of it on the channel before, and kind of a new perspective on the Tau, very different to Phil Kelly's writing. I'm actually quite a big fan of Phil Kelly's Farsight novels, but I really enjoyed that perspective on the Tau. Likewise, I should say that the Farsight series has very nearly caught up with modern 40k. So if you've never read the Farsight books all take place not just in the past, as a lot of 40k books do, but quite a bit behind where the current Tau lore is. So the next Farsight book will cover the second Damocles War, and that will cover the death of Ornvar, who is kind of the big bad of the Farsight Enclave's kind of storyline. He's like the worst of the Ethereals, and in the last book that came out, they basically are setting up this kind of like internal strife within the Tau Empire, as lots of people within the Tau Empire are secretly more aligned to Farsight than the Ethereals would like to admit. Orn Shi, the other kind of ethereal that you might know from the setting, he basically declares his opposition to Ornvar in this novel, and he's not alone. There's a lot of murmuring support of him. Because Farsight's a real problem for the Tau Empire, because the Tau are not allowed to kill each other. That's the problem, because the kind of the greatest propaganda that the ethereal cast have is that the Tau Empire used to constantly war with each other. They used to constantly kill one another with the different castes, and then the Ethereals came mysteriously, and the time of the Mon Tau was ended. And that is why the Ethereals have so much control, is because they are without the Tau, it's thought without the Ethereals, it's thought the Tau would descend into anarchy, and that's why Ornvar can't kill Farsight, because Tau can't kill Tau. You're not allowed to do it. And so, at least publicly, so he tries to lure the Tyranids to take out the Farsight Enclaves. He actually captures Commander Farsight, and that book was it was actually one of my favorites of the Farsight series so far. But it also tells us that the Ornvar story is now basically done. Ornvar is dead in modern 40k. The next book will go into more details on how he died, and then that basically catches us up to modern 40k, and we can have the inevitable Farsight Shadowsun case reunion that I think all Tau players want to see, because we find out in the last novel that basically these three characters, they have this thing called Talisera, which is like a Tau marriage, and this is the book from last year, and they basically got married, but then Case, well, they were going to get married, but then Case abandoned it because Case is the weirdest of the three, and then Shadowsun and Farsight fell out because of that. So yes, Shadowsun is loyal to the Tau Empire, and Farsight has his enclaves, but even without that, Farsight and Shadowsun never, they weren't friends, because their marriage, basically, they got left at the altar and they never really came back. It's an alien concept, so it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, they're basically it's a bitter divorce or annulment, I guess. I don't know what you call it, but it's not going well. But it would be pretty exciting to actually bring it. And I think that Case in particular is one of those characters that is in the lockbox of Games Workshop of characters they know will sell really well. Case is in particular, he doesn't follow like Kion or Kion or the other one. Oh my god. I'm a complete why am I having a complete mind blank? What's it called? Oh my god. Blah blah blah. Chat, help me. Dying here. Someone help me. Save me. Way of the Short Blade. Blah 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 blah. This is the problem with doing lore live. So you have a mind blank, and then all of a sudden you're Kion Montau? No. Oh my god. Ooh. Montcar. Bloody hell. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. I apologize for that, guys. Yes, a complete one. So you have, yes. So Monkar is Farsight, he's the killing blow, and then you have Shadowsense Kion, she's the patient hunter, and then you have Case, who is just the lone warrior, and he is it's called Monat, and so he's basically like the living weapon. When you read about Case, I always get the vibe of like, I don't know if you guys ever watched Firefly, but he's kind of like Serenity. He's kind of like he's kept in stasis for like a really long time, and when he's unleashed, he's just like a complete monster, because he's just like, I think he is described as the living weapon at one point, and so I always kind of like that idea of it, and I'm pretty certain they were copying Firefly when they wrote that lore. Element of Fly, thank you so much to gift memberships. If you got one, please thank Element of Fly. Also, jump in the Discord as well, and yeah, check out the members' content in addition. Anyway, where was I? Those questions. Yes, and anyway, yes, the other thing was the Eldar in Mon Warhammer 40k. That was the other question. The Eldar and the Orcs. So like I said, I do think the Eldar will come up, and they'll be a pretty big faction in Mon 40k when Games Workshop want to get around to it. And I think that the Orcs are going to be a bigger thing, because I mean, the Orcs have a really interesting kind of place in 40k, because like, yes, they're kind of punching bags, yes, they're kind of like a joke a lot of the time, but the thing about the Orcs is that they also have this capacity to be this incredible danger to the Imperium should they get out of hand. Because just as we see with like the Octarius campaign, etc., if the Orcs can kind of grow in power more and more as they fight, and in theory, if the Orcs battle long enough and hard enough, eventually the biggest boss will become so large he'll become a beast, a prime orc, and that will eventually mean he is one of the most powerful figures in the setting, and that is the destiny of Ghazghkull, Mag Uruk, Thraka, and was literally foreseen by the Eldar during the War of the Beast. So it has always been foreseen that one day Ghazghkull will be a danger to the Imperium. But yeah, it's just a matter of time, and he just needs to keep crumping. He just needs to keep all of that dagger, and then we'll see. Nick, theory explained. Valdor builds. Oh, hang on, hit it. Valdor builds Magnus from untainted fragments, shattered soul, as a Grail conduit to anchor and channel the Emperor's resurrection. He'd possibly be a powerful enough vessel. Interesting. I see where you're going. Okay, so that's what you're referring to. So, in terms of using Magnus's kind of the fragments of Magnus's soul, really cool theory. I mean, Games Workshop notably haven't done anything with Janus since like Buried Dagger. And they notably, for example, have Magnus kind of get, during the Ahriman series, in the third Ahriman book, when Ahriman conducts the second rubric and he thinks he's going to fix everything, Magnus kind of hijacks the rubric. And where Ahriman previously predicted that his rubric would be successful if Magnus was destroyed, basically, Magnus kind of hijacks it and basically uses the rubric to kind of restore himself, and takes all kind of the lost parts of his soul, all the shattered shards, and pulls them together into himself. And that is what makes Magnus far more powerful, and the reason why in 40k he's as powerful as we can expect him to be. But he doesn't get all of the lost parts of him. He doesn't get, for example, the good parts of him. And Janus is kind of like, he's got the part of Magnus within him, this Grey Knight, the first Grey Knight Grand Master, he's got the part within him which is like the good part of Magnus. And so that is still out there. And Games Workshop have probably done that deliberately. At some point, they intend to use this, either in the Scouring or for some other reason. And I think using it for like some kind of ritual or something to help out the Emperor would actually be quite nice. I think that would be I like your theory here in terms of like, if at the very least using the part of Magnus's soul, kind of the last good remnants of Magnus, in a ritual to like help the Emperor, empower the Emperor, create the Star Child, something in that regard. I think that's quite cool, because I think it would be quite satisfying for those kind of Magnus did nothing wrong fans and people who kind of have a sympathetic view to the Thousand Suns. I think I tend to do, to be honest with you. So I think that I quite like that idea. But in terms of it creating, using the parts of Magnus's soul as a conduit, an anchor to channel the Emperor's resurrection, he'd be a powerful enough vessel. So I think Magnus's body would be a powerful enough vessel for the Star Child, but that would require, I guess, because Magnus's body is gone really. So I don't think you really do it in that respect, because Magnus has like a body, isn't he's a demon Primarch, but his body is like warp stuff. And when it's in reality, it can be cut up and all that kind of thing. But I don't know if it would really work as a vessel in that regard. But his original body, as it were, just like when you see, if you read Angel Exterminatus, when you see like Fulgrim ascend, his previous body is like destroyed. And when Primarchs ascend to demonhood, like other people, it's kind of similar to dying. It's not a terribly dissimilar concept, as in like your soul ascends into the warp, right? And so it's kind of like they die. And so Magnus's original body is kind of gone. So if you, like, my personal theory for what Valdor is doing is he is trying to create. I think the reason he's messing around with Grails and cloning so many blanks is, my personal theory is that Valdor has been experimenting because he knows what the danger Abaddon poses to the galaxy is. He knows the Emperor needs to return in some form. And so what he's doing is experimenting on these vessels, trying to find out how to create a vessel that will be powerful enough to contain the soul of the Emperor, the Starchild part of the Emperor's soul at the very least. And so that is, I think, what Valdor has been doing. And I think perhaps that might even be the destiny of Beta Bequin in the future. I think that could well happen, because she's obviously the titular character of the book, and she is a very powerful blank. And in addition to that, like, she's like down the line, like, as she, I'd imagine in not all blanks are equal, and she's more powerful than the original Beta, the original Bequin was, because they've kind of refined the process of cloning these blanks over time. And so that's my personal theory as to what Dan Abnett is building towards. And so I think that the final Bequin book will end with the not so much creation of the Star Child, but the housing of the Star Child within a human body. And that would basically be the death, as it were, of Beta Bequin, because when we look at the other Grails, it appears to be the case that when the Grails enter the blank's bodies, the blank dies. Like they get overwritten by the Grail. But so Beta would like die, but you'd have something housing her body. That thing would be the last remaining remnants of the Emperor. So that's my personal theory, but I like the idea of using Magnus's soul. I'll be honest, I think that's quite cool in some way. Will be satisfying. Could Chaos corrupt the Votann AI? Chaos Votann. Almost certainly, to some degree. I mean, I don't really see why not. The Votann are often described as, in like the little lore we have on them, they're basically thought to be so mad, a lot of them, that the difference isn't too stark. There is one in particular, which name I forget, I don't know if everyone in chat can remember it, but there's one Votann in particular that is like the mad Votann, and the rest of the Votann have to like avoid it when they travel through space, because it will cause havoc for them if they go near it. But yeah, in theory, I can't see why you couldn't corrupt it, and AI being on the side of Chaos is not a problem, because the Dark Mechanicum already mess around with AI in the Heresy, so I think that would work pretty well. In terms of like Chaos Votann as a thing, definitely think it's quite likely we'll see them at some point. Like I say, I've talked about this before, but it is hinted that the Votann they were definitely around in the Heresy, but it's hinted that some of them may even have sided with Horus. I really hope we get some details on that. And given that the Scouring is an opportunity for them to establish Votann more into the lore, I hope we see the Votann appear in the Scouring. And just like, for example, Belisarius Cawl was a character they created for Warhammer 40k, but because they were writing the Horus Heresy at the same time, they could write this book, Wolfbane, and in Wolfbane they could like introduce Belisarius Cawl as a much younger man and set up the character for 40k, which is pretty cool. And so doing a similar thing with the Votann, which are definitely around, they're definitely there, but we don't know what they're really doing. So finding out exactly what the Votann were doing during the Horus Heresy would be really interesting and a great development. So we'll see. I think they are working hard to introduce the Votann more widely. One of my big predictions for this year as well is that I do think the Votann will take a pretty big part in the 500 Worlds campaign, which we'll find out in a couple of weeks. So I might be dead wrong, but I think they will do, because we're still waiting really on a properly big Imperium Votann team up. They do team up a little bit in the Dawn of Fire series, and of course they team up with the Eldar in Voidsguard, and they have their own novel where they do, we know, they trade and do work with the Imperium in High Karl's Oath. But a proper kind of dwarf human team up in space, we know it would do really well. It would be very popular. We know they're getting a new model as well, so I hope it's going to happen. I hope we get a big like Votann focus in 500 worlds, and it also ties in pretty well with the Votann's kind of newer lore in terms of they are kind of striking out from the center of the galaxy because the Great Rift has caused problems for them. So if they can find some worlds around Ultramar, or at least create some kind of space stations throughout Ultramar, it would be a great example of Guilliman kind of developing Ultramar and pushing the ideals of the Imperium kind of forward, I guess, and finding allies where he can, because I don't think Guilliman is going to shy away too much, or at least Titus as well, from working with the Votann. And I think it will be quite popular with the fans. We'll see. Gerard Butler, member of 16 months. Thank you so much, man. Wait, so Ghazghkull isn't as powerful as the Beast? No, and there's not just one Beast as well, and the Beast rises. Multiple of them. Sorry, as a spoiler, but no, he's almost certainly not as powerful. And like the fact that he in his battle against Ragnar, you know, it's covered in some detail in the Ghazghkull book, and like, you know, I guess I'd still call it like a Ghazghkull win, but he still gets his head cut off. Like, so it's a problem. The Ghazghkull definitely doesn't seem to be on that kind of level. I mean, it's important, like, even when Vulcan kind of sacrifices himself, that's not enough. Like, that's how powerful beasts can be. So there is a huge problem, and they get so large that I mean, in theory, I don't think there's a limit on how large beasts can become. So in like Ghazghkull could one day become easily the size of like a Gargant or a Squiggoth or something, and just become one of the biggest things in the setting. And perhaps that is his fate. And in fact, when Games Workshop revealed that Ghazghkull was going to get a new model, I think a lot of us were very interested in like just how big that model would be, because that tells us quite a lot about Ghazghkull and like where he's at in his journey. And he's still got a ways to go. Like, he's obviously a big boy. If you've seen the model, it's pretty big. But for him to properly be a threat to the Emperor, he's going to have to get much bigger. I believe the Mad Ancestor Core was due to Tyranid wiping out the league that protected it. Yes, I think you're right. It was the Votann that fought an entire Splinter fleet and watched all the Votann get killed. That makes sense. The kin, I think. Hold the phone. What if a demon Primarch stole a mortal body? Say, I don't know, a clone of a dead brother, while he claims to be said dead brother. Oh, sorry, what? A clone of a dead brother. Oh, I see what you're saying. As in, like, could a demon Primarch inhabit a Primarch clone? I guess in theory, they could do that. Yeah, I don't see why not. It hasn't happened before, but yeah, in theory, what that stuff can do, that can happen. One of the things that was really interesting that came out last year is that like Vashtor the Archifane gets summoned in the novel by some members of the Dark Mechanicum and the Iron Warriors. And the fact that he can be summoned, such a powerful demon, was interesting. And it kind of turns out that he wasn't really being controlled as such. This is sort of like the reveal at the end of the book, that Vashtor couldn't really be controlled because he's just too powerful and too strong. But he is still summoned across the Great Rift. And like, in theory, you can summon any demon if you wanted to. And that's, there's no real limit on it. You just have to make a sacrifice large enough, I guess. Sandman, what do you think of the mystery aspect of 40k? Things like the Pale Wasting, War of the False Primarch, 2 Lost Primarchs, etc. Yeah, I mean, 3 really interesting examples you choose there, right? So 2 of those examples are like paragraphs, right? And this is what 40k has historically done really well. The War of the False Primarch is a paragraph, and the Pale Wasting is like a paragraph as well. In what's the War of the False Primarch is Imperial Armor. Pale Wasting, I think, is the Deathwatch RPG, isn't it? So there's not a lot on them, and the whole point of those to be created is to just like, hey, I mean, use them in your campaigns, have fun with it. And there's definitely like a huge amount. There's huge options there. The Tyrant Star is a really good example, I think, where the Tyrant Star, again, is one of those things that's long been a thing in the setting, but we're about to have the Dark Heresy game released, and in Dark Heresy, the Tyrant Star is like one of the principal antagonists. So we're actually going to get a lot of lore on that. So all of these things have the option. I think the Pale Wasting and the Pale Wasting in particular, I think will be a thing. The War of the False Primarch, I doubt it, but it's because it's set in the past, but maybe. And the 2 Lost Primarchs, I think definitely one day. That's an end game scenario. You know, that's when all the Primarchs are back, Games Workshop stock prices are falling, everything's crumbling around them, and they're like, you know what we should do? And before we declare bankruptcy, let's just try. Let me just try this idea. I've got this idea for a second Primarch, and I'll give it a crack. Beta is distilled single malt Bedouin. Yeah. Another fun vessel for the Star Child will be Alpha Primus. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, Nick. I remember, interestingly, a lot of people had this theory, I think, immediately, funnily enough, when he came out, because there is this, like, a lot of talk in the books about, like, Alpha Primus's soul. And in particular, there's this sort of wording around how Alpha Primus's soul doesn't sit right within his body, which I can understand why people read and go like, oh, therefore maybe that's because his soul isn't meant to go in that body, and maybe it's the Emperor's soul that's meant to go in that body. I guess the only reason I think it might, well, because there's 2 reasons. A, I think Alpha Primus is a great character on his own, and I don't think he needs this development. And B, I think that the problem is that Alpha Primus's soul is too powerful for his body, and so why would his body be powerful enough to house the Emperor's soul, or part of the Emperor's soul, which is infinitely more powerful? So that's the only issue I have with the theory, but we'll see. Also, I guess, like, practically, if I'm being a bit cheeky, they are written by different authors. So the Star Child is very obviously a Dan Abnett storyline, right? It's too large, it's too big for anyone else to handle it. And Alpha Primus is, of course, a Guy Haley storyline who created, like, most of the lore we have on Belisari is cool. So I think they're sort of separate in that respect, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just typically, I think stuff like that, writers will own the idea of them. Universe is very keen on the good parts of major characters being literally excised from them in some way. Yeah, I guess. I know where you're coming from. I think that you sort of see that with essentially the Demon Primarchs, where it's kind of like, oh, you have the tragedy of it, and then they sort of go back and basically hint, oh, actually, no, they sort of planned everything all along, and they were always just awful. 2026. Let me see. I hope a real BS. I don't think it's bullshit. Blackstone, I'm going to guess. Blackstone weapon for the Raven Guard Chapter Master. But in reality, absolutely nothing for the Raven Guard. Raven will get stuff, even though Raven Guard has its own Forge World. Shaking my head. Yes, I mean, Dark Angels getting a Raven Wing release seems pretty likely, given that you have the Dark Angels Ravenwing bikers on the trailer of Dawn of War 4, and those bikers models currently don't exist in the game. So, that's... yeah, I mean, clearly the Games Workshop have already designed and created those models. They're just going to be released at some point, so presumably they will come alongside the Dark Angels Codex in 2026. And I will say, in relationship to that, I will say, I mentioned this the other day, where I do think you'll get a second Kroot release, because I think the Dark Angels were very obviously a bit screwed over by the supply issues that came out when Games Workshop were releasing the line and the Dark Angels, and so the Dark Angels didn't get all of their full releases. Like the Strike Master model that you see in the trailer, that should be a model. All of these things should be models already, but because of the supply issues that they had, they couldn't create everything on time. Like Ezekiel didn't get a model, or the Ravenwing didn't get a model, like the entire second company. So it's just, yeah, there's a lot of things that are yet to come out for the Dark Angels. The other faction where it seems quite obvious to me that they're missing a bunch of their range, most likely because of supply issues, is Kroot. Kroot got a bunch of new models, but they're missing a lot of the key ones. And so I think people want to see the Greater Narlac. They want to see the Kroot Riders. You know, there's actually, if you watch the, if you are one of the few people who keeps your subscription to Warhammer TV and watch their lore video on Kroot, they released this artwork where you've got like water Kroot, you've got air Kroot, you've got all these different Kroot, and they did this alongside releasing the models. I think it's relatively likely that they did that for a purpose, and that's that those models are going to come. And I think that seeing like Flying Kroot and seeing maybe aquatic Kroot would be pretty cool, and I think people would enjoy that. So I reckon all that's to come as well for them. So fingers crossed. And who doesn't love Kroot at the end of the day? You know, everyone hates the Tau, fair enough, but like, you gotta love Kroot, right? You gotta love them. What Xenos storyline would I want to see continued? I mean, I hate to say it, but perhaps even the Eldar. I think that the big one for me, I guess, is probably the failing of Komara. And if you're not familiar, Komara is in a really bad shape. Everyone's in a bad shape in 40k. Everyone's doing pretty badly. But Komara and the Drukhari are probably doing the worst of everyone. And this is a relatively, you know, it's a few years old now. But in the Vaults of Terra series, we discovered that the Great Rift, when it opened, of course, it carved our galaxy into two. But for the webway, what it did was it fractured parts of the webway, and it weakened the walls separating the webway from the warp. And for Komara, what that means is that the barrier that separates Komara from the warp weakened, and demons have started to spill through more and more into Komara. And as Asdrubal Vex has had to organize around this and battle the demons that are trying to invade their city, and that's where they come up with this plan to basically clone the Emperor and use Golden Throne equivalent technology to close the rift that is allowing demons to pour through into Komara. Now the Custodians find out about this plan, they stop it, and the Inquisition, and when that happens, the Imperium is screwed because they will no longer get the parts they need to fix the Golden Throne, but the Drukhari are now also screwed. They are now just going to have waves and waves of demons pour into Komara, and eventually, presumably, they'll overrun the city. So Asdrubal Vex has to come up with another plan, another scheme to save the city because he wants to remain in charge. And he has, basically got to come up with some new Drukhari technology or create a new Psyker equivalent character to power the Dark Throne to make sure that Komara is saved. And this is a pretty major plotline by Chris Raitt, so I reckon that's got to be addressed at some point. My guess was always that Drukhari would actually be the bad guys in Space Marine in 11th edition, because this plotline seems pretty pressing from my point of view. But so far no dice. But I reckon perhaps this year. I mean, it could. So, like I said the other day, Mike Brooks's writing has been very popular with the Eldar. The book sold very well, and I think that him writing as Asdrubal Vex, that was pretty exciting for me. I'm not a big Eldar guy, but reading Asdrubal Vex lore in the Lelith Hesperax book was pretty cool. I had a good time with that one. I don't know about you guys, but I really, I think Asdrubal Vex is one of those characters that, I mean, he's a very old Warhammer 40k character. He's not new, but because he's always sort of existed in the background, he's there, but he's not there. Kind of like the Silent King used to be. And with the return of the Silent King and how exciting that was, like, that was awesome. And it makes me more hyped for an Asdrubal Vex, like, proper emergence into the setting. He did used to have a model. He used to have like a command barge that you could have and run in your Drukhari army, which is stopped selling decades ago now, but they could bring that back and have him have a new command barge, proper kind of like Jabba the Hutt style sort of thing going on. And he's never going to be like the greatest fighter, I guess, in the galaxy, but he will be one of the smartest people in the galaxy, one of the most evil, one of the best schemers. I think that that'd be such a good time in a Asdrubal Vex model. So I would love them to give Mike Brooks Asdrubal Vex to write. Any big Eldar fan within the authors, but we know that Mike Brooks is he's more of a Xenos fan than a Space Marine fan, to be honest with you. So I think that he'd be the perfect person, and his Orcs novel sold really well, his Eldar novel sold really well, so I think that he's a safe pair of hands. Hi Sandman, if they made a live-action Caiaphas Kane series, who would you cast as Kane and Jurgen? Can't wait for your Jurgen video. Okay. Yeah, I do owe a Jurgen video. Okay. Hang on. Pull up some art. Alright. There he is. There's the boy. Perfect. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, who would we have for Jurgen? I don't know. Ciao. I'm not really great at the fan castings. I mean, that could be a Cavill, couldn't it? You could use Cavill as him. I don't know. It would be an interesting acting choice for Cavill. I think not kind of the character I've seen him play before. I don't know if you guys have watched enough of his films to say, but I think it would be quite interesting. But Jurgen, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough like kind of Eastern European actors off the top of my head. But yeah, it could be. I don't know. It would be good. Yeah, I mean, Cavill would be a pretty good choice. Someone with a prominent chin. That's who you need, isn't it? Um. Yeah, I don't know. Great question. Great question. I have to have a think. I haven't really done videos on fan castings before, but maybe I should do one. Maybe I can do one for the Primarchs if I had to think about who would play who. But yes, you are right. I will do a Jurgen video at some point. People hate my two favorite factions, Votan and Tau, but Valrak hates my two favorite factions, Votan and Tau. But his Primarch is dead, so his chapter can't be that great. All right, I won't wage war on him, but I do think we'll see Rogel Dawn in the near future. Don't worry. Henry Cavill, Tom Hardy is Jurgen. Interesting. Who would you cast Mr. Bean as? Probably Malkador. I think that would be a great one. Why don't the Dark Eldar just grab some Blackstone and build their own barrier like Belisarius is trying to do? I mean, great question. Really good question. I don't know. It's one of those things that's not directly addressed. Perhaps Blackstone can't be used in that way. Perhaps Blackstone only separates real space off from the warp. But yes, I get where you're coming from. In principle, in theory, that might work. But also, maybe they don't understand the technology because Blackstone, less of an Eldar thing. I enjoy a sneak peek in. We could enjoy a sneak peek into Eldar manipulations and a book where they win everything, where the schemes of foresight prevent a catastrophe. Oh, that's cool. I mean, yeah, like I really enjoyed in the Silent King novel. There's this chapter where Ilian Natase, this Eldar Farseer who works with the Ultramarines, he's talking to Gilliman about Gilliman's the schemes of fate, the Eldar kind of foretelling the future, and how they can't really foresee Gilliman's fate so much anymore. I think they say he says specifically Eldrad Ulthuan can occasionally predict Gilliman's fate, but the rest of them can't because Gilliman's fate is now tied to the Emperor, and the Emperor is like too powerful a being for them to kind of properly foresee. So that's why, yeah, it's kind of annoying for them that they can't foretell what Gilliman's going to do, and that is yeah, but it's kind of a cool little insight into how the schemes of fate work. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. Would you want them to serve? Would you want them to be like allied to the Imperium, though, Ricardo, or do you want them to like do a classic where they foretell that some maiden world's going to come under threat from Imperial kind of miners, and then they just kind of genocide them and fly off? Classic Eldar shenanigans. Hey man, long time fan, first time caller. Thanks for making deployments easier to grind through. I had 2 questions regarding the Star Child and Cool. No worries, man. Hit me up. Considering the weird way time works within the warp, there is the idea that warp entities exist in logic loops and weird time paradoxes such as Samus. Yes, pretty much. I mean, I predict your next question, which will probably, I'm going to guess, is going to be around like how things are created and if something is going to be created shouldn't already exist, as is the case with Samus. So Samus as a demon is around in the start of the Horus Heresy and presumably long before that, but his actual creation was at the end of the Horus Heresy when Loken is killed by the bastard that is the traitor Erebus, and likewise Slanesh is officially birthed in M30, but she of course existed long before that and has kind of always existed. And how does time work like that? So if there's going to be a 5th Chaos God or Vashtor's going to ascend, shouldn't he like already be a god is the question I'm going to guess you're going to ask. And it's a really good question. And the truth is, yeah, they just sort of play by their own rules. Games Workshop writers. I have to do a video on it maybe because it's quite a common question. And it is actually asked in the End of the Death Volume 1. Someone asked, like, if there's going to be a 5th Chaos God, won't there always be a 5th Chaos God? She's like, you idiot. Slanesh was birthed, but, like, you know, she always existed. And there's just... Yeah, it's not a particularly satisfying answer, but the truth is, I don't think I can give you a satisfying answer. And I guess in Games Workshop's defense, and you're well within your rights not to accept this, but in Games Workshop's defense, I guess that is sort of the point, is that the warp is a thing that doesn't make sense from our point of view. It shouldn't make sense. It is like John French, we were talking about the other day, when he talks about like the story of the creation of the will, the will of eternity, and the creation of Kaiwa's fate. John French says that that story is not like literally true. It's just like a metaphor for what the way the warp works. But like it's not like. But he says specifically that like the well of eternity isn't like an actual place in the warp, which is quite shocking because most people assume it is. But I guess the point is that you're not supposed to be able to understand it. It's not supposed to make sense to us, and I can understand people being finding that tough. But I guess in their defense, it is sort of, I guess the warp is supposed to be a realm of madness. So the warp has time when they want it to have time, and it doesn't have time when they don't want it to have time. And that is a very convenient answer. Happy New Year, bro. Are you still doing the live chat stage channel? It was fun talking to you, but I can't find that channel in Discord anymore. Yeah, I haven't done it for a while. Yes, it's a good question. I think with Lawmas, I sort of put to the side, but I can do that. Let me. Yes, I can set that up. Right, anyway, let me grab another question. Depending on the definition of demon princes, greater demons and non-chaos gods, great powers to chaos, it's all a matter of perspective. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. I don't think I can ever really give you like a great answer that you're going to be totally happy with, of like, oh, that's how the warp works. But yeah, it's sort of the thing, I guess. Oh no, that's one. What was I planning to do? Oh bloody hell! Actually, I think it's been wrong. Okay, I think I have to do it next stream, because I think what's happened is that it's been deleted from Discord somehow. All right, I'll have to add it back and then do it next stream. Paul, sorry about that, but yes, no, I would like to do that. I did really enjoy that, where people kind of like call in. It makes me feel like a radio host. It makes me feel like I don't have all these embarrassing technical issues every time I start a stream, and I'm actually some sort of like professional or something like that. So I really enjoy that. But yeah, for some reason, I don't know what I did, but it's been removed from Discord. Gilliman is the vessel for the Emperor, already decided by Godblight. I think that Primarch's body is a fair guess, but I don't think he will be the vessel for the Star Child like that, in that, like, permanently. I get where you're coming from. It's a pretty similar idea in terms of, in Godblight, he is filled with the power of the Emperor, and Mortarion looks up at him and he's his father, and he kind of feels that his father is in Gilliman very clearly. But I don't think that would ever be like the end for Gilliman's character. I feel like they would want to do something outside of the Primarchs, but it's not a bad theory. I haven't got any like problems with the idea, because of course Primarch's body is a pretty good guess for who would take over the Emperor. Hey Salmon, Happy New Year. Did you talk about what Big E said to Rogel as he was placed on the throne? I haven't actually. I will have to do something on it. Maybe next week. It's interesting because it's sort of yeah, I guess yeah, to sum up what I'll probably talk about, I think it's the case more that they're kind of covering all bases. So just like I talked about before on the channel, when the Emperor kills Horus, he says, "I wait for you and I forgive you." And I take that for what it sounds like. I genuinely believe he says, "I wait for Horus." A lot of people have tried to say, "Oh, I think it's like a metaphor or whatever." I can't really think why the Emperor would say, "I wait for you," other than he waits for Horus. I think that's what that means. However, as we then find out in Era of Ruin, Jagatai Khan and Ahriman, they believe that the Emperor, the Horus, has been destroyed, and he suffered, he's completely destroyed, which is why the Loyalists act in such accordance, and why the traitors act in accordance. And I think that seems necessary, because you couldn't you wouldn't want large numbers of traitors in the galaxy operating on the assumption that Horus is one day going to return, because they therefore wouldn't follow Abaddon, they wouldn't follow, you know, whatever Demon Primarch, whatever it's going to be. So you definitely want the people of the galaxy to believe Horus is gone, and that makes sense. And likewise, when the Emperor is put onto the Golden Throne, like officially, when Rogue Dawn, under Litu's guidance, he finds the throne card and realizes that the Emperor wants to be put back onto the Golden Throne, and that seems almost certainly the correct decision. The problem is that, and this is where Dan Abnett, I think, wrote well, and it's pretty brutal, is that both in The End of the Death and The Scouring, Rogue Dawn and Guilliman, etc., they believe the Emperor's going to come back at the start. They believe he's going to be on the Golden Throne. He'll use his kind of his warp powers, his perpetual abilities to regenerate himself, and then he'll be able to return once more. And that doesn't happen, and that's what's the brutal thing. So the idea that he potentially, the Rogue Dawn's going to doubt and think that maybe the Emperor did say no, didn't want to be put onto the Golden Throne, like, is a great idea. So yeah, I'll do a proper stream on it, I think, but I don't think they'll dive any more into that storyline, because I think that's basically it. I think that's it. Sort of, that's it, kind of done now, and it's left for you to decide. Like the Horus death, disappearance, destruction, I think has been written as it should be, because, like, I didn't think about this at the time when I read The End of the Death, but I can't remember who commented it, but someone commented on one of my videos. They were like, the thing is, the traitors would need to know, the traitors would need to be sure Horus had died, or else they'd sort of wait for his potential return. And given that Ahriman allegedly foresaw Horus's destruction, even if what I think Ahriman is wrong, I think it covers all that bases. Likewise, Rogue Dawn being racked by guilt on putting the Emperor onto the Golden Throne explains, or will go a long way to explaining why Rogue Dawn makes some errors that he makes allegedly. As if the law plays out as it did historically, then why Rogue Dawn makes a series of errors towards the end of the Scouring, and we'll see that happen. And the fact that he's racked by guilt of putting the Emperor onto the Golden Throne, whether that was the right decision, I think it's a great explanation for that and justification. So I think it's, yeah, actually quite cleverly done. Hazel, thank you for joining the channel, man. Please do jump in Discord as well. Are there any neutral entities in the warp, like pre-heresy Thousand Sons familiars, or are they all malicious? Yeah, they are there. So, like, it's interesting, like you say, like, are they all malicious? Because, like, the Talvar, the god of the greater good, for example, you might think that, oh, she's god of the greater good, but, like, she becomes malicious. It's clearly a malicious part of her, and her mere existence, the people that are in the presence of her, they immediately come to the conclusion that she desires to take over the entire galaxy. So that seems to be the case. But in terms of like neutral warp entities, I mean, that's largely what, like, Grails are sort of implied to be. And it's definitely the case that there are not all of the warp entities who are awful. For example, the Eldar have the legends of what it was like during the time of the Old Ones and when the warp was calmer. And during that time, the Old Ones would happily kind of use the warp more freely, because clearly there weren't as many malevolent entities. And my personal headcanon is that the reason we don't have any kind of properly, like, you know, noble gods outside of the Emperor, of course, is because the twisting nature of the warp means that the Chaos gods kind of consume their kind of, you know, neutral or kinder counterpart. So that's like where we see Nurgle is the god of, you know, death and decay, but also life. That's because maybe there was a god of life, but that got kind of consumed by Nurgle, etc. And you know, Slanesh is excess and pleasure, but not all pleasure is necessarily negative. That's because he kind of consumed she kind of consumed the worst parts of it. Tinfoil theory: due to the compression of time, the Emperor was talking to Horus in the past. His return was already complete. I mean, fair enough, man. I don't think that's what Dan Abnett would do, but hey, I can't say you're wrong. The ether desiring to eat the material realm is nothing new in all points at fantasy. Fair enough. That's actually crazy, because Litu could have been corrupted. Maybe Rogue Dawn is chasing Litu across the galaxy for that. I mean, that would be quite funny. It would be a hell of a twist. I feel like I feel like my video did a lot for Litu. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like before I did my video on Litu, no one he wasn't a particularly well-known character, but that video did number. I think it's almost got 1 million views now, and yeah, I get so many questions about Litu nowadays, which is great. So yeah, not an Inquisitor. Okay, one more time. Sorry, brother. Sorry, I tried to get through the questions. What do you expect from Abaddon? Future plans this year? Oh, great question. Because so the first thing, I guess there's two aspects of it. Firstly, you have his kind of secret plan with Vashdor, and then you have more his direct waging of war against the Imperium of Man. So in terms of his secret plan with Vashdor, like I mentioned earlier, rocks up into the Pariah Nexus with the Dissonance engine, with this kind of remnants of Caliban. And I think it's relatively likely that, therefore, Abaddon's going to be well aware of these plans and well aware of what's going on. And so this is all playing towards Abaddon and Vashdor's plans to kind of unlock the weapon that they will use to defeat the Imperium in some way and allow Vashdor to ascend to godhood. So that's all going to be going, continuing on, and maybe we'll find more information on that. And then you have his war against the Imperium, and Abaddon's had some good wins. The Nachman Gauntlet, and the idea that Chaos is can continue to press forward to Terra can only be helped by gathering more and more Blackstone, and potentially we'll see Abaddon even extend the Great Rift even further. And perhaps that's what Vashdor has been planning for, with his plan to kind of allow Belisarius Cawl to continue on his merry way and develop all this technology, which is that if Belisarius Cawl builds all of these pylons across the galaxy, across planets across the galaxy, to close sections of the Great Rift, if Abaddon can take over those planets and just charge the Blackstone the other way, instead of closing the Great Rift, it would extend the Great Rift. And that's what I think we're going to see for Abaddon and Vashdor's kind of interim plotline whilst they're working in the background and gathering this weapon. The other big Abaddon plotline, the Hand of Abaddon plotline from the Dawn of Fire series. And it's the one part of the Dawn of Fire series I'm a bit sad about, because this was really going somewhere. I thought it was really cool. And the fact that we kind of got Yang of Thalamor. She's got the Anathane Blade, she's got it reforged, and she's been blessed by all 4 Chaos Gods, and she's, it's got I think it's got like the gem of the Ring of Bucharest in it. It's very specific, but basically there's this Chaos Sorcerer who's now been chosen. She was chosen by one of the Hand of Abaddon, and now she's been chosen by the Chaos Gods, and now she's got the Anathane Blade, which has been reforged and empowered, and so she's out there with a weapon that could kill Guilliman. So she's gonna rock up. She's gonna turn up again at some point in the future, and I think that storyline, it was the long build up. The Dawn of Fire series had its problems, but that was a really good storyline. And opposite her, we have Kesh, this Mordian guard, and she becomes an Imperial Saint at the end of the not the end of the Dawn of Fire series, but in Book 8. And in Book 8, she becomes a Imperial Saint, and she's kind of cool. She's got like smoky wings and all this kind of stuff. So she's pretty badass. And the fact that you've got this kind of like new Imperial Saint, and you kind of like Chaos Saint type figure, she's also like absorbs the heart of a Blackstone fortress. She's pretty badass. I think that storyline is like one of the only good things to come out of the Dawn of Fire series, and I really hope they do that. And the reason I really like that development is that of all the things Abaddon has done, when we talk about Abaddon and we talk about him in terms of like, to what degree is he his own man? To what degree is he actually just kind of kept under the control of the Chaos Gods? And maybe he's just too stupid and doesn't know it. The reforging of the Anathame is Abaddon making a specific decision to go against the wishes of the Chaos Pantheon, because according to Erebus, the Anathame Blade was ordered destroyed by the Chaos Gods. It was their intention to have it destroyed. And Abaddon's like, no, fuck you guys. I'm going to reforge it. And so he has his servants do that. And then, after he does this, the Chaos Gods are perhaps like having a little bit of a problem with Abaddon, perhaps due to his alignment with Vashdor, and they kind of co-opt this mission, and they choose Yang of Gothalamor as their champion. And so now Yang is going to have to make a decision. Either she aligns to the Chaos Gods, or she's going to align with Abaddon, and either way, she's going to be a bit of a force to be reckoned with. So, of everything that Chaim has worked on, I think that he knows. I've talked about his books many times, but I do think he knows how to make a cool character, and I think that yeah, I hope we see her again in the near future. But that is an Abaddon storyline that I really hope gets picked up, because there's so much you could do with it. And of course, everyone keeps asking the same question. I see it online all the time. How does Abaddon expect to win? How does Chaos expect to win, really? Because the Primarchs are so powerful when they return. They're even more powerful with the watchful eye of the Emperor keeping them safe. And like, how can Abaddon win? He's just a Space Marine. But not only do we have the Demon Primarchs, who Abaddon can kind of sort of control, but Yang of Gathalamor is also someone who now has a weapon that is basically specifically designed to kill Primarchs. So I hope that we see that team up. It could work. I think they will release a Purty model after the Scouring series gets to the Iron Cage, and after that we will get 40k Purty. Oh, interesting. So you think they'll do a 30k Demon Primarch Purty? Yeah, that could happen. Not impossible, and it would sell well. It's just like free money for Games Workshop. It'll be interesting to see whether, because the third edition of Horus Heresy started last year, and so that's got 3 years on it. But it will be interesting to see whether like the fourth edition of Horus Heresy leans much more into this idea of like it's Horus Heresy and the Scouring, because then they can they'll make a lot of money from releasing Mark V. They'll make a lot of money from releasing characters like Demon Purty, but they can't really do that if they don't make it clear that this is also kind of Scouring lore. But then we're still yet to have a campaign kind of focused properly around the Siege of Terra in the Horus Heresy kind of background books, which will have to happen at some point. And the Horus Heresy is one of those things where we get 10 books on it, 11 books on it, but there's still a lot more to cover. There's still there's so, in terms of the way troop movements and the ships were behaving, all that kind of stuff that fans go really mad for. There's so much more we can dive into. As Voice Guard was highly ranked by readers, could we be expecting more Eldar love and possibly rekindle the Yvraine storyline? I think yes and no. So I think it would definitely see more Eldar love. In terms of rekindling the Yvraine storyline, the funny thing about that is that Yvraine appears in the Lilith Hesperax novel from a couple of years ago, also by Mike Brooks. And in that, I mean, the way I read it, I don't know about you guys that have read it, but Yvraine is basically a dead end in that book, and it seems quite apparent in that novel just how much of a dead end the Inari are at. There's not really much for them to do, to the degree that, I mean, part of the novel is Lilith Hesperax kind of giving up and going home because there's not really anything left for them to do. She doesn't even particularly stick to the ways of the Inari. She's still soul thirsting and she's still choosing to feed on people suffering for fun and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that the Inari storyline, it's not finished, but I think that they'll have to find another purpose for them. Perhaps as my personal theory is you could use Yvraine is still a priestess of Iniad, and so she still has potential to resurrect dead Eldar or restore Craftworld and Yandan or something like that. But I think that would be the best use of her as a character and the Inari, and I don't think you have to bring back Iniad to make it compelling. Aristocat, for your good work, keep it up. Thank you. That's very kind. Very, very kind. True tinfoil theory. Both Alpha Legion Primarchs are alive. They're living through the Legion itself being, oh god, what is that word? Phylactery. Phylactery of their souls. I have never read that word before. So therefore it's not a real word, is it? Phylactery has two main meanings. It's a small box containing scripture worn by men during prayer as a religious reminder. But in D&D, it's a magical container holding a lit soul, allowing its undead existence, making it a powerful magical item reliquary. Interesting. Okay, so you're saying that the two Primarchs are kept alive, living within the Legion. Interesting. Well, that's fun. I mean, you could do something like that. I guess that's sort of in line with, the I am Alpharius idea, and the idea that Alpharius sort of became more than just, one man or two men. And when he died, he sort of lives on in that respect. But yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll see in the Scouring, Guilliman fighting against Omegon. And if Omegon survives, or it will be very, very easy for them. I spoke about this with Josh a couple of weeks ago. It will be very, very easy for them to set up Omegon or Alfarius' return, because all they need to do is have like one passage where you've got like a Chekhov's gun type situation or something, where if you've got a scene where Alfarius is messing around with teleporting technology, biology technology, some sort of technology that it would allow fans to speculate that perhaps he managed to switch bodies or escape at the last moment, it would be quite easy to do. Likewise, we'll be relatively confident to see if he dies, but because as I spoke about with Josh, he should sort of like explode when he dies, and if he explodes, we can be pretty certain he's a Primarch. So that will be interesting to see. But I don't know whether you need him to survive. I think that the it's definitely a thing, like in the setting. It's not just a fandom thing that the Alpha Legion, a lot of them suspect, or at least some of them suspect, that one or both of the Primarchs have survived. But in terms of whether that's a necessary component for the future of the setting, yes, we'll see. We've got, I think, the second Harrow Master novel coming out next year. The art for that got leaked a couple of months ago, and that novel also did very well. It did good numbers, and again, we've got kind of a new Alpha Legion type trajectory. And in the first book, it says that the Alpha Legion's kind of greatest success is basically they've infiltrated the Inquisition at a very high level in that story. So we will see what happens with that. And like, I don't think you need Alfarius Omegon to return, but of course I get the desire. It's Primarchs, but I don't know. We'll see. It's I think officially the answer is to say no, because I believe Black Library have said they're dead. But more Primarchs is always more fun. Doesn't Abaddon want to kill Peter Turbo? They've got along reasonably well in recent years. Like Perturabo has served Abaddon in the past, and Abaddon is able to do things that Perturabo isn't, because Abaddon is based in this reality, whereas Perturabo is kind of based in the war. I'm with you on being super bummed by Dawn of Fire. We got all this cool Chaos intrigue, Anathame Reforged, new Imperial Saint, and then they just do Necron things for the finale. Yeah, I mean, I actually had, when they announced that book, I went back through and I tried to find, have they actually set up the Brian Nexus campaign or story in any way in the Dawn of Fire series? And I think there was like one reference. Like, for example, in the Demonifuge book, that book ends with the Demonifuge kind of discovering that they're being drawn to this kind of part of the galaxy where there's this she calls it the blackness, right? There's blackness. It's part of the galaxy where it's cut off from the warp, and so that's where she goes. And that book is very clearly leading into a Pariah Nexus story, and she's at the Pariah Nexus, so it makes sense. But the Dawn of Fire series, yeah, it did kind of come out of left field, and yeah, I guess they just wanted to round it off because it wasn't selling very well, but it was selling badly because they wrote some bad books, and they wrote some books that weren't very interesting, right? Like, there are always going to be those books where it's just like, this is just some fan service for a Space Marine chapter that you probably don't like, but some people like this faction, so we're going to make those books. And that's fine. Like, that's fine for them to do it, because if you don't like the faction, you don't read it. If you like it, you have a great time. But like, the Dawn of Fire was just sort of like a lot of random fluff like that, and given that it kind of killed your hype for it. Like, the first book was great, second book was interesting, third book, I think the third book had more of a negative consequence than we like to admit, because I mean, as much as YouTubers are tending to clickbait and that kind of thing, I mean, that was the worst example of clickbait I think I've ever seen. You can't call a novel The Wolf Time and then not have it be The Wolf Time. Games Workshop, that was just stupid. Of course people were going to be kind of not interested in your series after you do that to them. That's just dull. It's not even like clever, it was just boring. And so yeah, and then the fourth book again was interesting, but people kind of lost interest. And then the fifth book, Iron Kingdom, just killed it dead. I think they should have just called it, like, I think if they had, like, for example, imagine this, right? Imagine if they announced a series and it was called Warhammer 40,000 Anathame, That would be a great story that people would be like, okay, this is a plot based around the idea of the anathema. People would be interested. And if all of the books, because this is the thing about the Dawn of Fire series, once you get to the end, you realize a lot of the plot points were all building up to the reforging of the anathema, but in quite loose ways. So you needed to have it be clear that it was building towards the reforging of the anathema, or at least something with the anathema. And then you need to make it very clear in each book that you've got the servants of Abaddon, the Hand of Abaddon, who are out there trying to find all the lost pieces of the anathema shards, and that's the purpose of each book. And then you can bring in random factions here, there, and everywhere, and that would be pretty exciting, I think, for the fans. And I think that would have been a series that people were really engaged with. And they just called it the Dawn of Fire series, which was, again, not a great name, because the Dawn of Fire series immediately sort of told us this was temporary, because the Dawn of Fire was the temporary flagship of Rabute Guilliman. You know, it wasn't destroyed until the end of the series, but we always knew Guilliman was going to get the McCragg's Honor back. Like, obviously, he was going to get the McCragg's Honor back because it's the McCragg's Honor, like, it's his flagship. So, yeah, it was a bit shit. Perhaps they should have had like a big Red Corsair. I think maybe if they had a big Red Corsairs focus at the start and had the Red Corsairs be opposite Guilliman. Like, the Red Corsairs being an antagonist for Guilliman is great. Not only did they steal his flagship, but of course it's relatively likely that the Red Corsairs are sons of Rabute Guilliman. And the reason for that is that most Space Marines are sons of Rabute Guilliman. So the idea that Guilliman is brought face to face with some of his traitorous sons is a great plot line for him. That would have been a lot of fun. And instead, they just did kind of nothing. I don't know. Hindsight's 2020, but it's a shame for me, because I feel like they take away the wrong idea. They take away the idea that 40k fans aren't interested in great series of books put together. That's not what you should take away. What you should take away is that 40k fans aren't interested in boring books and books that aren't gonna do things that are exciting. We should have seen the traitors hitting Nihilists hard, worlds being taken by Black Legion, Night Lords, Empress Children, and others as they make their terrible empires. Yeah, that would have been fun. I do think that would be a great idea. I think especially, like, I like the idea of like building various empires. I don't know, like, it's one of those things, again, classic 40k. At the end of Remnant Blaze, they sort of hint that, like, oh, maybe this could be the start of a new Night Lords kind of beginning, but yeah, I don't know if they're going to be confident enough to continue that storyline. When do you think we will see another Loyalist Primarch return? So, based on the current trajectory, so you had Guilliman at the end of 7th, you had the Lion at the end of 9th, and 10th? Yes. No. 9th. Mad. No, yes. Yes, the end of 9th. Yes, that's right. Sorry. Guilliman at the end of 7th, the Lion at the end of 9th, and then, sorry, it's not the end of 10th yet, is it? I was completely messed up. Too late. And then that would tell us that you'll get the next Loyalist Primarch returning at the end of 11th edition, which is the next edition to come out. So that's pretty cool. But that is 3 years away. So my personal theory is, based on that timeline, is that you will see Jagatai Khan returning to the setting in 3 years. 3 years' time. Which is relatively long, I guess, in practical terms, but in 40k terms, it's not actually that long for Lord to develop like that. But that's not set in stone, and I'm going entirely based off of the 6-year gap between the Lion and Guilliman. But if they see a stock price fall, or I tell you what, if Dawn of War flops and Total War flops, yeah, you'll see a Primarch pretty soon, I reckon, because they'll want to satisfy some shareholders, and they've probably promised some pretty big numbers, given that they've got 2 pretty important games for the setting. So, oh, I'm dying. But hey ho. I thought Rostov was a cool character. He was a cool character, to be fair. Yeah, I did like him. I'd like to see a novel from Talos' point of view and how him and the Night Lords survived the Scouring. Oh, interesting. You could do that, I guess, and then leading that into Conrad Kerr's The Night Haunter. You could do that. You mentioned on another stream all of the AI videos. Do you plan on making a video about that? Yeah, perhaps. I've already got a few things in the chamber that I'm currently working on. And like I mentioned before, my port editor has done this amazing work, and I need to do my end of that. So I will. In fact, I might even skip the stream this week just to make sure I get a video out on Wednesday at the very least. So yeah, we'll see. But yes, I might do that. I think people would have fun. I think that the reason it would be good is because I don't want to make a video of like, oh, AI videos are rubbish, I hate them, right? But I think it would actually be quite entertaining. I downloaded a couple of videos for this where you've got these AI videos that just sort of invent their own lore. They just make it up, and it would be quite I think entertaining, because I can go through how these events don't happen in 40k. Like, they've just made stuff up, and I think people would enjoy that. But yeah, that's a little down. I can't wait for my grandkids to see all the Primarchs back. Yes, me too, brother. I mean, it's one of those things. It's so slow. It is so slow. I get why they spread things out, of course. They want to can I say blow your load on YouTube? We'll find out. But at the same time, if you're gonna want to blow a Primarch every so often, right? We got GTA 6 before any more Primarchs. And that's actually true, yeah. Primarch in stasis in glass case labeled breaking case of bad sales low. Yes, I mean, as funny as that is, I really believe that is true. I really believe that's so true. That's how it works, in that they know what they're doing. And the thing is, I think that you'll see it being pushed really far. Like, I think that I don't know if this is a bad thing or a good thing, but I think you're probably more likely to get a new Gilliman model before another Primarch. Because the old Gilliman model, like, it's good. I have it actually, and it's like fine, but they've got a little bit better. I think if you've painted the Gilliman and you've painted the Lion, you'll notice the Lion is a little bit, the plastic's a little bit better quality. It's like a little bit more detailed, all that kind of thing. So the poses are a little bit better now. Gilliman's pose is a little bit more like, look at my sword, you know what I mean. And I think, yeah, you'll get another Gilliman model. And with the Lion, for example, I feel like they've sort of already set that up, because when the Lion got his lore in the Dark Angels Codex, they were like, oh, and just so you know, the Lion doesn't always fight with his the Blade Fealty. Sometimes he fights with other weapons. He has a whole array. He has power mauls and stuff. And of course, the Lion doesn't have the Lion Sword. So when the Lion Sword is returned to the Lion, that's going to require another novel. And I think that would be, yeah, I think that would be quite funny. Yeah, Ali, yeah, if you could send it to me, yeah, let me know. That would be great. What future is there for Cypher after the Emperor says? Not yet. I can't see the direction they are going. Yes, it was a weird thing to do. So the question is, I guess, yeah, I guess there's two levels. Is what is Cypher's mission, and who is Cypher are the two big questions. So in terms of who is Cypher, yeah, I did a big video on it before with Quipster, where I was pretty clear on my opinion that Corswain is Cypher. But I don't hate the idea of people being like, oh, he's a merge between Cypher and Zahariel. I think that makes sense in terms of Cypher being a bit mad, to be honest with you. And people it does seem odd that Gilliman doesn't recognize Cypher. That does seem odd. It should happen. Abaddon also doesn't recognize Cypher. Probably should do. So perhaps it's the case that like Corswain, I think, is more likely in that respect, because there's no documented encounter of Corswain and Abaddon, and there's no documented encounter of Corswain and Gilliman. Zahariel definitely met Abaddon. Now, in terms of, yeah, how they're merged, I think that would make sense. But in terms of what the Emperor means by not yet, then that tells us that, so what would that person be willing to do? If it's a merge of the two, they probably have some sort of mission. Actually, either way, I think the mission, there's two likely options. One is to bring back the Lion, and of course, where Cypher is the difference. So we don't know why the Lion awakened when he did. That's not officially said. There's an easy answer. They could say it was connected to the Great Rift and the Emperor becoming more powerful, and perhaps he could awaken the lion himself using his magic. Or you have the fact that perhaps Cypher is trying to kill the Emperor. And this is something even Cypher posits in the book, Cypher Lord of the Fallen, because it's first person, but he's sort of man talking to the reader. And in that, he does posit like, oh, maybe I'm an assassin. Maybe this is an executioner's blade. Maybe my purpose is to kill the Emperor, which was long a theory. And so that is an option. So either he means not yet, don't kill me yet, or he means I can't help you yet. And I think my hope is that Corswain is Cypher, and he was connected to the revival of Lionel Johnson, and somehow the Emperor aided Corswain in reviving the lion in some respect. But that's personally my theory. But it does work. Everything does kind of sync up if your view is that Cypher's plan is to kill the Emperor. But why the Emperor would want to be killed, I just don't know. Doesn't Cypher kill Abaddon's bodyguard Terminator in a Codex paragraph? Yes, I did that lore the other month actually. Yeah, so it's in it's in another book called Cypher Lord of the Fallen, but it's not the novel Cypher Lord of the Fallen. It's a campaign book called Cypher Lord of the Fallen. Games Workshop, wonderful at naming things, as you can imagine. Going to Warhammer World in a couple of weeks. Oh, amazing. Traveling all the way from Sweden, so I don't want to miss anything. Any suggestions? Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to spend a day. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely, you'll definitely have time to play models, play games. So don't worry about that. But yeah, the museum is awesome. You can go upstairs, and there's, yeah, I mean, it's so cool because you get to see all of the models that are like in White Dwarf, and that you know would have read, seen in books and campaign books over the years. They're all, most of them are up there that you'll recognize, and so that is just, I mean, to this day, that's such a crazy experience. And then Bugman's Bar is, of course, a really great time as well. But yeah, there's some really cool tables. They go really over the board with making some really exciting tables. I remember when I was a kid, me and my brother playing like all the time on the like a whole day on the Minas Tirith setup. And last time I was there, they had like a whole Titan table, epic. So yeah, it's a great time. It's a great time. I think that if you're not going to play any games, there's not that much to do, I'll be brutally honest, but it is still a great time. Do you think 40k would ever get an anime? I want it. Oh man, I think it's a great question. I think so. I don't see why not. I'm not the biggest anime guy, to be honest with you. But I don't see why that wouldn't work really well, because especially if you were to do something like the Heresy, or parts of the Heresy at the very least, because presumably it's too expensive to do in live action. So doing it in an anime, and I don't know how it did, but didn't they do an anime of Star Wars? After Disney bought it, I can't remember. Like Star Wars Visions, is that the one? Yes, I think that's it. Star Wars Visions. I don't know how that did, but just as how, oh, there you guys got 3 series, so it's done pretty well. But yeah, like, so I don't see why you couldn't do an anime of 40k, and you can yeah, really push it out. And it doesn't, if they do something relatively kind of low budget, like to start with, and try something different, if I mean, if Amazon want to try and use this as like their a smaller version of like Marvel or something like that, then it makes sense to try different mediums, right? I don't see why not. There are some stories that, like I said, you probably couldn't do in live action, but would work great in an anime. I mean, if you're going to do any kind of anything with like Space Marines, it's going to be tough to do it. It's going to be tough to do it in live action, but I'd love to be fucking wrong. Do you think it would make sense to have a new Psycherish chapter again, like the OG Thousand Suns? You mean the Blood Ravens? I think the idea of getting more lore about the warp can be about how the warp can be used by the Imperium would be cool. Yeah, I mean, the Grey Knights, do the Grey Knights not satisfy your desire there? Or are the Grey Knights so secretive nowadays, people have truly forgotten they exist? I think that, I mean, yeah, I guess that's the problem, is that you tread on the Grey Knights' toes. And to be honest, the Grey Knights are one of those factions that need a lot of love. I don't know exactly what I would do with them. for going forward. But I mean, Drago is still out there. He's still having a good time or a terrible time, most likely. There we go. Will you be covering the Dark Heresy game? Almost certainly, yes. They did. I played it the week actually. So they did send me the alpha. The alpha, I think it's just called, isn't it? Yeah, the version of it that is you can play like 2 missions, I think, in it so far. I don't know if they've updated it since then, but that should update once it moves into the beta stage. So I will play it in the beta stage. I mean, the alpha looked great. I mean, it's if you're not familiar, I did do a stream of it the other day. I think I unlisted it, but you can still find it in my Lawless. Oh, in fact, it's being updated as we speak. So the thing about Dark Heresy is it is basically Rogue Trader, is in the layout. It looks exactly the same, which I think is fine. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But also, it's got new storylines, and it definitely looks a little cleaner. It looks a bit better. So it's it's just an improved Rogue Trader, really. But I haven't played the Rogue Trader Trazen expansion yet. I don't know when that's supposed to be coming. Is that out already? But yes, I'm pretty excited for that. That would be cool. Go into, I think, Trazen's library, right? I don't know if anyone knows, but that would be awesome. The Grey Knight models are so short, people don't notice them there. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the Grey Knight strike teams are now smaller than the squats. I'm pretty certain. My buddy has them. We love you so much. Thanks, bro. Reading Pandarax currently, and didn't realize it had such a big Grey Knight presence. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I won't spoil the ending for you, but yeah, it has quite a funny ending to that campaign, funnily enough. But yeah, that book's actually pretty good, and it's like that's one of those books. It's quite old now, but it was, again, to accompany a campaign. But in fact, that would have been 2nd edition of Armageddon. That would have accompanied, if I remember correctly. But yes, I always mean to talk about the Emerald Cave Greater Demon, big baddie. I like the demon specific targeting thing. It makes them kind of, I don't know, hard to relate to. Maybe they're too elite almost. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think that's sort of like Death Watch. I think Games Workshop have toyed with the idea of kind of removing the faction and making them just sort of part of an Inquisitor army or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. Sandman, do you have any personal theory as to why Lohawk never removes his helmet even in front of the Fallen? Good question. I mean, he isn't killed by the lion. So this is one of the Fallen who joins the lion as the Risen. And the lion doesn't kill him, which means that it can't be like a touch of the warp problem, right? Because then the lion would have to murder him. But as far as we know, yeah, it doesn't really say. I don't think he's appeared or mentioned. Other than, I tell a lie, he comes up in Arcs of Omen. There we go. But yeah, I don't know exactly. I don't know. Yeah, to be honest, no idea. Maybe just disfigurement, or I don't know. It's a good question. If it's not a chaos corruption, oh, it could be. Perhaps just an injury, or perhaps it's like some sort of vow, like he doesn't intend to take off his helmet until Caliban is restored or something like that. But yeah, it could be. I think you raise a really interesting point, Ardia, in terms of all of the all of those Risen characters. Especially I think people really fell in love with Zabriel in that novel, and I think that they haven't really used them a lot. I mean, presumably they're all there in Arcs of Omen, but they're not like addressed by name very much. And so I think that people would really like to see a continuation for those characters in 40k. And the Dark Angels have had so little lore. It's just, it's a bit of a shame, really. Where is Perturabo right now? Do you think he will become a Vashtor? Well, it's about 11 o'clock at night where I am. So Vashtor probably in the pub, going playing chess in some sort of hardcore underground chess tournament. But in terms of 40k, I mean, he is, he's not like doing anything major as far as we know right here, right now. We do know that he has provided aid to Abaddon, provided aid to Vashtor, and I've only ever seen him once in like the novels, okay, and that's in a short story. So where he's just on Medringard. So nothing particularly interesting there. We know that he fights all the time in the warp and is constantly battling. He gets a bit of lore in the Death Guard Codex, where he had a bit of a spat with Mortarion. I think they fought for 7 days in the War of Rust and Ruin. So he's definitely still about, but he's not doing anything major as of right now. But no doubt he'll get a massive transformation, both physically and kind of narratively, through his ascension in the Scouring. When Guilliman goes into the Garden of Nurgle and burns it, where was Aisha the Mother? Did GW abandon that plotline? It's not the first time we see the Garden of Nurgle. No, it's no mention of her. So, great question. So, I guess it's not too unsurprising we don't see her, because we don't even like properly see Nurgle. It's a really cool description where in the Godblight, when Guilliman is in the garden and he sees the Black Manse of Nurgle, where Nurgle lives, I think like they just like, it's a great description of Nurgle sort of being like just like peeping out like a creepy neighbor, and you sort of like see his eye as he's kind of like staring through, and that's all we see of him. So we don't see like the big monstrous god kind of eldritch horror that we'd imagine him being, but we do see him in there. So not seeing her is not too surprising, because she's also in the manse. But yeah, in terms of whether it would have impacted that story, like I think I get that comment quite a lot. It's a great question where people ask like, would Guilliman's burning of the garden like potentially freed her or something like that? Definitely an option. Definitely something Games Workshop could play around with, because yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. I don't see why you couldn't do that, but there's nothing official as of yet, but fun to theorize on. Can you explain Marbus, old lore? Marbus is a problem. Marbus is a problem for Warhammer 40k, because whilst the Dark Angels are, I think he has art from the book, doesn't he? Anyway, so whilst all of the Fallen have got like a fate at some point in the near future, right? We've got the Risen, who are going to join the Lion, and they are going to serve him in various ways. We've got the Risen, who are loyal to the Lion but have been touched by chaos. The Lion has to kill them. And then we have the Fallen, those Space Marines of the Dark Angels, who are actually just turned full traitor and sided with Luther, or have turned properly traitor since the Lion, since Caliban was destroyed. And so the fact that and so they all have an obvious fate. So the Risen will, of course, be redeemed by the Lion, and the Fallen will either be killed by the Dark Angels, or they will be like sacrificed or something like that. Like it's always a possibility that Luther has actually repented. According to him, he does repent, and that's always been the case. But it's questionable whether he was being honest in that moment. So the question is, will the Fallen sacrifice themselves? Like, or like, you know, maybe like, will they have to die? Like they can't survive. They won't be able to rejoin the Legion. And the Lion was very direct that when he sees Luther, he will definitely kill Luther. Luther has to die, because the Lion knows his purpose is to kind of rid chaos from the galaxy and protect humanity. So Luther is definitely on the way out when the Lion meets him, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a brutal combat. It could be, like I say, Luther has genuinely repented and he will like sacrifice himself and his warriors to save the Lion, and during some random novel at some point. But Marbus is a problem, because Marbus of the Fallen is a demon prince, and is a pretty big character. He appears in the Dark Angels novels, appears in Unforgiven, and he is a problem because demon princes can't properly die unless you permakill them. Go back to the warp, and then they will come back. And in addition to that, it's kind of like a mockery of the Lions. The Lion's not going to be happy. He's got like a lion head, and so basically he's the worst part of the Lion's nightmare, even compared to Luther, I imagine. So it will be interesting to see whether the Lion can permanently kill demons. It'd be a good way to bring that up. Of course, the Lion Sword is an Executioner's Blade, so maybe the Lion Sword is able to permanently kill him or something like that. Or maybe the Lion's going to have to find another way to perma-kill this demon. Or, like I say, he's just going to be a problem where all of the other Fallen will die at some point, or they'll be, you know, join the Risen, and then you're just going to have Marbus out there just on his own, just doing whatever. And maybe that's good, but it just feels a little bit of a slightly unsatisfying ending. So yes, I hope that we get to see an interesting development there, that maybe the lion is able to permanently kill him or something in that regard, because that would be a really good way of making his battles versus the demon Primarch seem a little bit more interesting. And also, of course, he gets a new ability to play around with. Ardy, thank you for the gift of memberships. So kind. Yeah, if you got one, please do thank Ardy. In AOS, a Stormcast sees Nurgle while running through Nurgle's garden. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned AOS. Like, sometimes I keep meaning to read more into some of the AOS lore around Nurgle, because in particular, my friend was telling me that there's a Nurgle character who became a Stormcast Eternal, right? There was a Nurgle character who got redeemed, and he like then is killed and becomes a Stormcast or something like that. And so that's as close as we get to like 40 that I've ever read of a major character who is properly sworn into chaos, and they end up like being redeemed in some way. So maybe there's something in that we can use to talk about, can demon Primarchs be redeemed someday? Will they ever return, etc., etc.? But we'll see. What's something you do want to see from the Phoenix Lords? So yeah, again, I'm going back to the Inari. Of course, a couple of the Phoenix Lords had sworn in with the Inari and were dedicated to the cause, but now the Inari plotline's kind of gone nowhere. They're all backtracking. So I think that I think that if my personal thing is that I would like to see the Eldar Empire kind of start up again in some kind of small fashion. But then that would be a perfect use of the Phoenix Lords, because their job is going to be protecting this kind of nascent Eldar Empire. Sorry for repeating, but it froze for me a while back. Is there a demon in 40k called Pox Fulcrum? Pox Fulcrum. Sounds like a thing. Definitely a demonic-ish name. I can't place it off the top of my head, man, I'm afraid. But there are a lot of demons out there. So, I mean, almost certainly. Is he an AOS thing? Is that what it is? Because if it's an AOS thing, I mean, in theory, if he's an AOS demon, in theory, he's going to be around. But yeah, I guess it's not a one-for-one, typically. Yeah, but I don't think so. Coming back from chaos has to be possible, because on a long enough timeline, the narrative will demand it. Yeah, I think if they ever do an end times, all of that stuff's got to happen. If anyone needs that, it's Magnus, but it removes something of weight of his flaws if it happens. True. Yeah, that is true. I mean, I think that I sort of like the tragedy of the Demon Primarchs. I like the tragedy of Tharian and Buried Dagger and Magnus the Red, of course. So as much as I can kind of yearn for the Demon Primarchs to maybe get a sort of redemption storyline, I like the Primarch. I like the Demon Primarchs that truly loved their sons, even if their sons didn't love them, because I think that is, yeah, I kind of like the epic tragedy of that. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think they'll be deleting Chaos Space Marine range anytime soon. That seems a bit grand. Yes. Oh, sorry, I forgot what I talked about. Oh, yes, Total War. Total War was the other thing I wanted to talk about. Well, that came in for 2026 before I wrap up, I think. So, Total War coming out this year seems to very much sort of confirm the option of the orcs being the bad guys in Warhammer 40k for 11th edition, because they're on the poster sort of opposite the Ultramarines, and that kind of makes sense because they'd probably sync those things up, and Games Workshop will want to use Total War as an opportunity to sell models. Furthermore, in the Total War trailer, they actually had like one of the new orc characters who's never appeared in a book before, but he has got a model, the guy that's riding the pale squig, I forget his name. So they're definitely working up to have a kind of a greater orc presence in Warhammer 40k. But in terms of like what this means for like the lore. Once again, like we got to see what the big chaos is. There going to be a big chaos incursion, a big chaos threat to the galaxy, because that will almost certainly be connected to a major Warhammer 40k storyline in the lore. Yeah. Oh yes, because I don't think they've revealed who the Chaos Space Marine faction is yet, have they? No, they haven't. Yeah, it's just Orcs, Space Marines, Eldar, and Imperial Guards so far. So yeah, we need to find out who the Chaos faction is going to be. I would guess Black Legion, but again, like for people asking whether Abaddon will get a storyline, connecting it to Total War makes a lot of sense. It has got Primaris Marines in the trailer, and so we can be confident it's set after Cadia has fallen, and so it's sort of the existence of Warhammer 40k Total War to me kind of, oh sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. The existence of it basically demands that they're going to have to come up with a new plot line for Abaddon in the future. And because we've got the Ultramarines and because we've got Craft World Ulthway, if you're going to have these two teaming up like properly, the threat's going to be pretty big. This is the big Eldar faction, the big Space Marine faction. So I can't wait to see if it is the Black Legion who are the antagonists, and it's not like when they do Total War, just like we saw with Warhammer the End Times, the lore is what made Warhammer Total War so popular, I think, and so they have to come up with a genuinely like intriguing narrative driving force to introduce the Black Legion to this story. So I am very hopeful that we'll get a big Black Legion storyline, and if not this year, then next year. I don't actually know when the release date of Warhammer Total War is, but I believe they said 2026, didn't they? Does it say here? Which is actually this year. No, it doesn't say. But yes, I think people were saying it will be about a year from the release date, so that would take it to December 2026, and a decent time period between Total War and then Warhammer Total War, we'll say. What is even going on with Leviathan? So, the Biologist Apothecary, what's he called? Voltus? The Apothecary, what's his name? Something with a V, I want to say. Yes, Voltus. Yeah, I remember that. There we go. Yeah, so Voltus is if this was like a new Space Marine type role that Games Workshop created when they released the 9th edition, 10th edition, sorry, where they've got this new kind of Gravis Ultramarine character. Lovely painted in models, everybody. And so yeah, he like all the Space Marine characters like have a name. Like it's not necessarily their official name, a named character in like Calgar's a named character, but they do always have like a name. This guy's name is Voltus, and he appears in the Leviathan novel. And the Ultramarines make a series of errors in the story, but at the end of the story, they kind of complete their work. And basically, he's able, if you have a look at his little carry case here, this little carry case exists to basically house like Xenos components. And so he's a apothecary biologist who's kind of obsessed with experimenting on Xenos and finding ways to defeat Xenos. So you got a Death Watch force, definitely one for them. And as a character, he takes one of the. If you ever look at the Tyranid models, in fact, so, all right, if you take a look at the Tyranid models, maybe I can find one. But sometimes on the back of them, you can see they've got little kind of like parasite-looking things, symbiote little things, and they actually mean something in the game, or at least they used to. I don't know if they still do. They definitely used to, where they would like give you little buffs. And so you've got these Tyranids with, I don't know, we've got them. Gone are the days. Anyway, so yeah, they've got the little like neuroparasite things on the back of them sometimes, and basically he captures one of them, or captures two of them, and so he sort of experiments on using these little neuroparasites to disrupt the the presence of the hive mind around the Tyranids, and ultimately this could lead to like the swarm going feral or lead to the swarm's destruction in the future. And so whilst the Ultramarines kind of lose at the end of that story, they lose with the revelation that they might have developed a weapon to help them beat the Tyranids in the future. So they definitely wrote the book Leviathan, Darius Hinks did, for a follow-up, because they want it looks like that will be the culmination of the Fourth Tyrannic War. Check. Chaos Lord Mortkin became a champion of Chaos, but later in life, an Imperial killed his son. He got up, went and avenged. Then he renounced Chaos and died free. Actually pretty cool. That's badass. I have to mention him in a video at some point. I do, yeah, maybe I'll do one. Redeeming Primarchs. But there you go. So yeah, that's basically the idea around here, is that if you can get if the next time the Ultramarines fight against the Tyranids in another novel, I think that what you'll see is Biologus Voltus kind of turning up, and Guilliman will probably use himself as bait once again, because the Tyranids want to take out Guilliman. And then as the Tyranids kind of commit their force to the planet, if they can utilize this weapon to kill the Tyranids, then they'll blunt most of the Fourth Tyrannic War. And that's a pretty good way to end the saga, because you want to defeat the Tyranids in like a epic battle, of course, but you also want them to be defeated in a way that the Tyranids can then just adapt, and it won't be, they can't just keep repeating the same weapon every time. And so biological weapons are a perfect example of that, where next time the Imperium fights against the Tyranids will have evolved, and thereafter they won't be able to be easily so caught out. But there we go. So it's pretty exciting. Terrible book otherwise, though. The Lion and Guilliman have to meet this year. It's been too long. I mean, they do. Unfortunately, yeah, I mean, it could do. It could very well be this year, because, yeah, I mean, Games Workshop must be aware at this point how loud we've all been. I think we'll get a mention or a story involving Yarrick. Seems fitting. I do really think that if the Orcs are getting a big focus in 11th edition, Yarrick coming along with them definitely makes sense. One of the most popular characters in the history of the setting. I don't think I've ever actually done a video on Yarrick, but yeah, he's definitely wildly popular. I want one of the Phoenix Lords to beat the brakes off of Vulcan mono y mono. Yeah, fair. That would be cool. They can always just keep summoning the Incarn as they need. But yeah, I think the Phoenix Lords feeling much more like a serious presence. Because the problem with the Phoenix Lords is that they can be killed. And any character that can be killed and come back, it's kind of enough to the character, really, because what that means for the writers is that they're going to have a Primarch kill your character, and then you're just going to come back. So I think that, yeah, I think that that's the problem with the Phoenix Lords, is that they were too easily the punching bags for so long. But I think getting like a really big win in that respect would be awesome. I do think Lycis is going to get a bunch more focus in the future. I'm sure she'll get a novel at some point. I was surprised she hasn't had one already. Lycis is the new Phoenix Lord character for the Warp Spiders, and the Warp Spiders are pretty cool, pretty powerful. So I think that her getting a bunch of focus there, that I reckon that'll come this year. Anyway, I think that's going to be it for this stream. As I say, I might skip Wednesday's stream, depending on if I get a video out, but I will otherwise be back. I will definitely be back this week. But yes, thank you so much for joining me for the stream. I hope you had a good time. Do let me know in the comments what you guys think, what you think is going to happen in 2026, what are you excited for, how angry are you that the Lion and Guilliman still haven't met, and I will see you all next time.